It was a town like any other, quiet streets, manicured lawns, the gentle hum of normalcy. Maple Creek was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other by name, where kids played kickball in the street until the sun went down. But on a crisp autumn evening, that picture-perfect facade was about to be shattered into a million pieces. The name on everyone's lips would soon be James Callahan. To his friends he was Jim, the friendly accountant, the devoted family man who coached Little League, always had a smile ready. No one, not even those closest to him, could have imagined the darkness lurking beneath that affable exterior. A darkness that was about to plunge their peaceful community into a real-life nightmare. The story really begins not with a crime, but with a simple, ordinary life. Or so it seemed. James Callahan lived in a charming two-story colonial on Elm Street, a home filled with the laughter of his two children and the warmth of his wife, Sarah. He worked a steady, if unremarkable, job at a downtown firm, managing finances for small businesses. He was reliable, trustworthy, the kind of man you'd hand your life savings to without a second thought. The investigation began not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a keyboard. Maria Flores, the young auditor, couldn't shake her suspicion. She started digging, spending her evenings poring over years of financial records. It was tedious work, a sea of numbers and spreadsheets. But then she found another one, and another. Small amounts, always just under the threshold that would trigger an automatic review. They were disguised as vendor payments, reimbursements, miscellaneous expenses. Each one on its own was plausible. But together, they formed a pattern. A faint but undeniable rhythm of deceit. It was a slow, methodical siphoning of funds. Maria took her findings to the charities board, her hands trembling slightly as she laid out the spreadsheets. There was skepticism, disbelief. Jim? No, it can't be. They trusted him. He was their friend. They brought in an external forensic accounting firm, meant to prove Maria wrong and clear Jim's name. The forensic accountants found exactly what Maria had, and more. They uncovered a system of shell corporations, ghost invoices, rerouted payments. The small trickle of missing funds was actually a river, flowing steadily into accounts that all led back to one person. With the discovery of the shell account, Detective Miller's investigation expanded exponentially. He obtained warrants for Callahan's personal and business financial records, and what they revealed was staggering. The charity was just the beginning. It turned out that James Callahan was running a massive Ponzi scheme. He had been taking investment money from friends, neighbors, fellow church members for years, promising them incredible returns from a special investment fund he managed. These were not wealthy financiers, they were teachers, retirees, small business owners, people who trusted good old Jim with their life savings, their children's college funds, their dreams for the future. The money, of course, was never invested. Callahan used new investors' money to pay dividends to the earlier ones, creating the illusion of a profitable enterprise. This classic scheme allowed him to keep the con going for over a decade. The rest of the money funded a lavish lifestyle that was cleverly hidden from his Maple Creek neighbors. While he drove a modest sedan in town, he owned a luxury sports car he kept in a garage across the state. He took secret trips to exotic locations, telling his wife they were business conferences. He was living a double life, financed by the trust of everyone he knew. The human cost began to come into focus, and it was devastating. Miller and his team started interviewing the victims. There was the elderly couple, the Thompsons, who had given Callahan their entire retirement nest egg. They now faced the prospect of selling their home of 40 years. The reaction from Callahan's family was one of profound shock and denial. His wife Sarah just couldn't comprehend the accusations. The man she had been married to for 15 years, the father of her children, was being called a monster. When detectives first approached her, she defended him fiercely. She told them about his long hours at the office, his dedication, his simple tastes. She had no idea about secret trips, the luxury car, or the source of their comfortable life. For her, the discovery was a cataclysmic event, not just an uncovering of financial crimes, but the realization that her entire marriage might have been built on a foundation of lies. The community of Maple Creek was torn apart. The initial disbelief quickly gave way to anger, shame. People who had once greeted each other warmly at the grocery store now averted their eyes. The victims felt foolish, blaming themselves for being so easily duped. Those who hadn't invested with Callahan felt a strange mix of relief survivor's guilt. Friendships fractured along the lines of who had lost money and who hadn't. The case became a dark cloud over the town, a constant topic of hushed, pained conversations. The man who had been a community pillar had become a wrecking ball. As the news spread, more victims came forward. People from neighboring towns, old college friends, even distant relatives. The day of the arrest was quiet, almost anticlimactic. There were no flashing lights, no dramatic standoffs. On a gray Tuesday morning, Detective Miller, two uniformed officers driving to the Callahan home on Elm Street. Sarah answered the door, pale and drawn. James in the kitchen sipping coffee, James reading the newspaper. When Miller told him he was under arrest, Callahan nodded. He finished his coffee. He stood up. He didn't protest. He didn't argue. He put his hands behind his back, unreadable. The perp walk from his front door to the police car was a spectacle. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, faces a mixture of sorrow and vindication. The man they had shared barbecues with was now in handcuffs. News cameras filmed him being placed in the back of the squad car. He looked directly into a lens, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk. It was a look that sent a shiver down the spine of everyone who saw it. A look of defiance. He believed he was smarter than everyone else. He thought he'd get away with it. The arrest sent a new shockwave through the community, mixed with relief. The secret was out in the open, support groups formed, meetings in church basements, meetings in community centers. They were no longer isolated in their shame. For Detective Miller, the arrest was the beginning of the next phase. The case file was now inches thick, but a courtroom is a different kind of battlefield. The fight was far from over. The trial of James Callahan began in the spring of the following year. The county courthouse had never seen so much media attention. Every day, the gallery was packed, victims, their families, curious townspeople. Callahan, dressed in a tailored suit, sat beside his defense team, looking more like a corporate executive than a man accused of destroying lives. Throughout the proceedings, he maintained his calm, almost detached demeanor. He would occasionally jot down a note whispered to his lawyer, but he rarely showed any emotion even when his victims took the stand just feet away from him. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Jessica Russo, laid out the case methodically, piece by painful piece. She walked the jury through the complex financial web Callahan had woven using charts, using graphs. But her most powerful evidence was the testimony of the victims themselves. One by one, they took the stand and told their stories. The elderly Mr. Thompson, his voice cracking, described how he had trusted Callahan like a son. Mark, the single father, spoke of the stolen future he had planned for his daughter. Callahan's defense team tried to argue that these were not deliberate acts of fraud, but a series of bad investments that had spiraled out of control. They tried to confuse the jury with financial jargon and complex market theories, but their arguments crumbled under the sheer weight of the prosecution's evidence. The most dramatic moment came when James Callahan himself decided to take the stand. Against his lawyer's advice, he seemed to believe he could charm the jury just as he had charmed his victims. He spoke smoothly, his voice full of feigned sincerity. He expressed regret for the losses, but accepted no responsibility. But on cross-examination, ADA Russo dismantled his facade. She confronted him with one lie after another, one piece of damning evidence after another. His calm exterior finally cracked. He became defensive, arrogant, evasive. The jury saw for the first time the predator behind the mask. The verdict, when it came, was swift. Guilty, on all counts. The guilty verdict brought a wave of relief and catharsis to the courtroom. Tears, hugs, quiet expressions of gratitude. For the victims, it was not a celebration but a moment of solemn closure. The money was gone forever. That was a harsh reality they had all come to accept. But the verdict meant that their pain was acknowledged. It meant that James Callahan was held accountable. Justice in this sense was not about restitution, but about truth. In the aftermath, the town of Maple Creek began the slow, difficult process of healing. The case left deep scars. It forced a painful reevaluation of trust and community. People became more cautious, more skeptical. The easy familiarity that had once defined their town was replaced by a more guarded atmosphere. Yet, in a strange way, the shared trauma also brought people closer. The support groups that had formed during the investigation continued to meet, evolving into networks, friendship, mutual aid. The community learned a hard lesson about vulnerability, but they also learned about resilience. The James Callahan case became a cautionary tale studied in business ethics classes and cited in fraud prevention seminars. It served as a stark reminder that the most effective con artists are not shadowy figures in dark alleys, but people who master the art of blending in. They exploit our most human instincts, our desire to trust, our hope for a better future, and our tendency to believe what we want to believe. Callahan's methods were not new, but his execution was a masterclass in psychological manipulation, a chilling example of how a trusted position can be weaponized with devastating effect. Today, nearly a year after the verdict on this day, September 6, 2025, the story of James Callahan still echoes through the quiet streets of Maple Creek. The house on Elm Street has new owners. The children are rebuilding their lives with their mother far from the town that holds so many painful memories. It's a quiet reminder that the fabric of a community is woven from threads of trust, and that a single person, driven by greed, can pull on those threads until the whole thing comes undone.